Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Abhi Janamanchi. My pronouns are he, him, one of the ministers serving this religious community. This is a place where love works, where we gather to explore the eternal, nurture community, build a more just world, and dare to rehearse and embody the vision of the beloved community where all are welcome. If you're new with us this morning, please let us know in the live chat. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our Unitarian Universalist siblings from the Unitarian Church of Barnstable in beautiful Cape Cod who are joining us today. Whether you're joining us today for the first time or you've been with us for a lifetime, you are welcome here. Whoever you are and whomever you love, you're welcome here. Wherever you're joining us from and however you arrived at our worship time together, you are welcome here. Whatever your beliefs, gender identity and expression, immigration status, or political views, you are welcome here. Thank you for taking a chance and taking the time to worship with us today. We invite you to fill out the newcomer form included in the chat. And if you've been attending for a while and are interested in being a member of this religious community, please reach out to Nicole Kazi, our membership and communications coordinator, at nkazi@cedarlane.org. our pastoral visitors are an extension of the ministry team, and they are available in the chat today to support you. I have a few announcements. Today is our 8th annual United Nations Sunday, which celebrates the work of the United Nations and our Unitarian Universalist office at the UN. It's an opportunity for us to engage with the story of our global Unitarian and Unitarian Universalist faith by deepening our understanding of the UN on its 75th anniversary and reaffirming the connections between our UU principles and the vital issues dealt with at the UN. We're delighted to welcome to our pulpit our guest speaker, Ms. Rachel Pittman, who serves as Executive Director of the United Nations Association, USA. At 2 p.m., join us for a special Zoom forum, UN at 75, Is It Still Relevant?, with Bruce Knotts, Director of the UU Office at the UN, Ed Elmendorf, past President of UNA USA, and UU UN team members Ambassador Don Bliss and Marlene Berg. Please look for a Zoom link to the forum in the live chat after the service or on this slide. Join Cedar Lane's UU The Vote phone banking team to make calls to people in Florida on Tuesday, October 27th from 7 to 9 p.m. Over 15 people have already joined the team. We hope you'll join us in the lower parking lot on October 31st between 4 to 6 p.m. for a COVID-safer alternative to Halloween, or from 6:30 to 8:30 for a youth Halloween movie. The RSVP link is on the slide. And finally, next Sunday, November 1st, the service will include a remembrance ritual for loved ones who have been lost during the pandemic. We're also creating a temporary memorial for those lost to COVID on our campus. If you've lost a loved one during this time, please email naming the lost at cedarlane.org with your loved one's name and photo, and specify if you would like this included in the worship service and or if you would like it included in the memorial. And now let us greet and welcome each other in the chat.
We, the peoples of the United Nations,
determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war,
to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of all people and of nations large and small,
to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom,
and for these ends to practice tolerance and to live together in peace as good neighbors,
to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security,
to ensure that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest,
to employ international machinery in the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all people,
have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims.
in service of these ends, we gather in affirmation, commitment, and worship. Come, let us worship.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Sawyer, the Worship Associate for today's service. My pronouns are she, her. I'm lighting my chalice in Rockville. As I read our chalice lighting words, I invite you to share in the chat where you are lighting your chalice from. We kindle our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In the search for truth, may we be just. In the quest for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find and live peace. One of the wonderful things about teaching school in Montgomery County is you get to know families from all over the world. One of the things I used to do to try to reach out to the children was to read poetry from whatever country they were from. I got feedback sometimes from parents who were thrilled that I had read a poet from their country to the whole class. One of my favorite poems I'd like to share today is from this book, The Same Sky, and it's gathered the poems from all over the world from one of my favorite poets, Naomi Shihab Nye. The poem I'm going to read is from Pakistan, and the poet is Samira Shiraz, and it's called Grandmother. I hadn't asked her much, just how she felt, and she told me all about her day, and how she washed the sheets, and how she could not understand why the towel got so heavy when it was wet. She also sunned the mattress, such tired bones and so much to do. And my eyes filled with tears when how I thought I was simply going to say salam and walk away. And so many words would have been trapped inside her. I would have passed by as if what lay between those bedclothes was just old life and not really my grandmother. So, this week, you might try reading some poetry from other cultures to get to know them a little better, and also try talking to an older person so the words don't get trapped inside them.
Hello, my name is Malala and I'm from Pakistan. We have a very urgent mission to complete by 2030 and you can help us. Together, we must fight inequality, end extreme poverty, and respect our planet. I'm determined to do this. Are you?
Excuse me. Hello? Have you got a minute? Well, this is important. We need your help. Imagine you're traveling in space. You're looking for intelligent life. You've been traveling for a while because space is very spacious. You've already spotted millions of planets with no life at all, lots of acid, lava, that sort of thing. But nowhere you'd go for your holidays. And then you see it. Earth. A tiny island in space. A little speck of water, rock and soil with a thin veil of air that we can breathe. There might be life out there in space, but here on Earth, it's everywhere. On the land, in the water, in the air. Plants, insects, birds, fish, and every type of living creature. Some beautiful, some, frankly, a bit weird. And people, billions of people like you and me. You know, beautiful, reasonably intelligent life. Well, I'm just saying. In most ways, we're just like the rest of life on Earth. We start from tiny seeds, and with the right conditions, we grow and mature. To do that, we all need the same basic things. No, not mobile phones, trainers and Facebook, but fresh water, clean air, and healthy food. Without those, we don't last long, no matter how smart our phones are. The good news is that Earth has enough for all of us. The bad news is we've got some serious problems in our way. The first is climate change. The way we're living on Earth now is damaging the very things we need to live. The fuels we burn are choking the atmosphere with gases we can't breathe. We're running out of clean drinking water, but some of us waste it on things that we don't need. And all of this is changing the weather, and that's not even the half of it. The second problem is inequality. Some people on Earth have far more than they need, and most people don't have nearly enough. Many live in terrible poverty. It's just not right. Millions of people are unable to get medicines or healthcare that could stop them from getting sick, or cure them if they do. In some places, children complain about having to go to school. In others, millions of children can't go to school at all. Is that fair? The thing is, we're causing these problems. So we can fix them too, if we all work together and get creative. Let me explain. If you think about it, all living things have superpowers. Birds can fly. We can't. Dogs can smell things we can't, which is not always a bad thing. Plants absorb gas that we can't breathe and turn it into air that we can. But human beings have a power that other creatures don't. We are the most creative creatures ever. Our heads are full of ideas and we're great at making things too. And with that power, we've already changed the world over and over and solved thousands of problems. So now we can do it again. The good news is we have a plan that can only succeed with your help. There is one organisation in the world that represents the people of 193 countries, and it's entirely dedicated to keeping us peaceful and working together. You may have heard of it, the United Nations. They have just announced the Global Goals for Sustainable Development. These are 17 goals to protect the planet against climate change and make the world safer, fairer and more just for everyone. We have to achieve these goals by 2030. The great thing about a plan is that we can check how we're doing as we go along, give ourselves a pat on the back if we do well, and try harder if not. 2030 isn't so far away, so we need to start right now. There's a lot we can do if we work together and get really creative. We can start by making these goals famous. So find out what they are and tell everyone, and ask everyone to tell everyone else. Then, and this is the exciting bit, see if there's something practical you can do to actually help. If we don't waste food, water or electricity, that would help protect the planet. If we all stick up for people who aren't being treated fairly and respect each other's human rights, that would make a big difference too. There are 17 goals altogether, so lots of different ways in which you can help. We also need some new ideas and new ways of doing things. What if being a girl or a boy made no difference to how safe you feel, the friends you have, or the places you could go? What if we found new ways to make water clean and drinkable? What if we could recycle all of our waste? What else do you think we could do? We all live on Earth, and we depend on the Earth to live. We have so many different cultures, but we only have one planet. If we take care of it and each other and share what we produce fairly and sustainably, everything we need is right here. Someday we may find intelligent life on other planets. In the meantime, let's see how intelligent we can make it down here for all of us. At home, on Earth.
Just saying. dream. One song heard by everyone. Just like the moon that keeps on shining. Just like the stars that keep on twinkling. I know a world of wonders playing on and on. Just like the sun, these gifts are here for everyone. One light, one sun lighting everyone. One light warming everyone. Da 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 da.
Thank you, members of the Children's Choir and Jenny Crane, for that beautiful song by Safi, One World. Let us now center ourselves for a time, inviting our mind, body, and spirit into the space that transcends time and walls, a space in which the holy pervades. Each time we gather for worship, we set aside time to expand the caring ministry of our congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the heart of our religious community. Within our Cedar Lane community, our hearts are with those whose primary spiritual practice is the raising of children. We hold in our circle of caring those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental illness or addictions, those who have experienced job loss or face financial insecurity, and those who are particularly vulnerable. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to those whose lives are lost and whose lives are impacted by calamities and violence and the COVID-19 pandemic in our nation and in our world. Especially this week, we hold in our hearts and pray for care and healing of the millions who have been infected by the coronavirus around the world, and mourn the more than 1.15 million people who have died from the virus, including more than 225,000 people here in the US. We celebrate the ratification of the international treaty to ban nuclear weapons, allowing the historic, though symbolic, agreement to go into effect in January 2021. Holding all the people, all the joys and sorrows we bring into this space, let us now join our hearts in prayer, meditation, or reflection. Would you pray with me? Nameless one of many names, courageous love that will not let us go, be with us and among us today. Help us remember the extent of our resilience and the ways we can go deeper. Help us tap those wells of strength and persistence that lie within. Help us find a path that we can follow for this time, a path along which we can remember truths we have forgotten, find forgiveness we have been needing, connect with the loving kindness that the world needs, discover the courage that our vision demands, and the peace for which we have been yearning. Help us, O Spirit, as we recognize how we are all in this together. Help us to live in the presence of grief and despair and the presence of wonder and beauty too. Help us, most of all, to see our own lives connected to others, those at risk, those who are the most vulnerable, and reach out with love and compassion. O great Spirit of life, be with us, no matter where our journey takes us, reminding us of all the blessings we know, reminding us of who we are, of all the places and people, the communities who have helped us along the way, and reminding us of our interconnectedness and interdependence, how we need each other to survive and thrive. Hold us, O Spirit, guide us, ground us as we find our way. Call us to the work of love, the work of justice, to the work of liberation, when all of us together will know the place we call the beloved community. In the name of all that is holy, life-affirming, life-sustaining, we say, Shalom, Salam, Om Shanti, Amen. Blessed be. As we enter the stillness that silence brings, those who are mourning a loss, or marking the anniversary of a loss, are invited to rise in body or in spirit and to share a loved one's name in the chat in mourning and memory. May it be so. Each week at Cedar Lane, we have an opportunity to practice generosity through giving. We build this community together, this community that holds us so closely and weaves us together day after day, year after year, and make love work in our religious community and around the world. There are many ways to give to Cedar Lane. You can give by the electronic means of our modern times, by text, online giving, PayPal, QR code, or by the ancient spiritual practice of mailing a check to the church. Today, we share the plate with the UUA office at the United Nations. Let's watch this video to learn more about the important work of the UUA office at the United Nations.
At a time when nationalism is so dominant around the world, having a Unitarian Universalist voice represented at the United Nations is more critical than ever. The Unitarian Universalist Association office at the United Nations has held a prominent place at the UN since 1962, advocating for UU values on the global stage. By engaging every day with member states and agencies and speaking out in defense of human rights for those who are oppressed, the UU office has become a force to be reckoned with at the UN. The UU at UN's advocacy and coalition building helped to make sexual orientation and gender identity human rights a priority throughout the UN system, and we continue to be a leader on sexual orientation and gender identity issues within the UN human rights community. This year, our office is focused on bringing the global community together to share solutions for demilitarizing local police forces and to amplify just and inclusive ways to keep communities safe. Through our affiliation with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UU office at the UN gets credentials for observers to represent Unitarian Universalists and participate in the annual UN climate conferences. In recent years, we have prioritized getting passes for Indigenous and frontline climate activists who are so often excluded from these intergovernmental conferences. We know that the international community must come together to solve global problems like climate change, but that governments aren't necessarily the ones who have the right solutions. Solutions need to come from communities that are most impacted by the changing climate. And the UUA office at the UN is proud to help representatives of these communities get to international gatherings so that their perspectives can be heard at the decision-making tables. None of this work would be possible without the generous support of Unitarian Universalists. Right now, those who represent the United States at the UN are working hard to destroy protections for human rights, for the environment, and for global cooperation. Make sure that you still have someone at the UN who's committed to upholding your values and interests. The UU office at the UN relies on congregational and individual donations to continue its work advocating for a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Please donate generously now to help our office maintain this important presence at the UN. If at least 5% of this congregation's members donate at a supporter level of $60 or more, you are on your way to achieving the 6th Principal Congregation Award. You can donate through text or online. To give by mobile phone, simply text UN Sunday to 51555. To give online, go to giving.uua.org/UU@UN. Thank you so much for your generosity. Your gifts can truly have a global impact.
In the words of the Reverend Lynn Unger, for all that we bring and share to make this a beloved community of spirit, may we be grateful. Thank you, Cedar Lane Quartet and Dr. Jasmine Lee, for that beautiful piece. Our reading today is an excerpt from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' remarks marking the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. He says, "The ideals of the United Nations, peace, justice, equality, and dignity, are beacons to a better world. But the organization we celebrate today emerged only after immense suffering. It took 2 world wars, millions of deaths, and the horrors of the Holocaust for world leaders to commit to international cooperation and the rule of law. That commitment produced results. A 3rd World War, which so many had feared, has been avoided. Down the decades, there have been other historic accomplishments, including peace treaties and peacekeeping, decolonization, human rights standards, and mechanisms to uphold them, the triumph over apartheid, life-saving humanitarian aid for millions of victims of conflict and disaster, the steady reduction of hunger, the progressive development of international law, landmark pacts to protect the environment and our planet. Yet, there is still so much to be done. 25 years since the Beijing Platform for Action, gender inequality remains the greatest single challenge to human rights around the world. Climate calamity looms. Biodiversity is collapsing. Poverty is again rising. Hatred is spreading. Geopolitical tensions are escalating. Nuclear weapons remain on hair trigger alert. And the COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare the world's fragilities. We can only address them together. Today, we have a surplus of multilateral challenges and a deficit of multilateral solutions. I welcome the General Assembly's 75th anniversary declaration and commitment to reinvigorate multilateralism. National sovereignty, a pillar of the United Nations, goes hand in hand with enhanced international cooperation based on common values and shared responsibilities in pursuit of progress for all. No one wants a world government, but we must work together to improve world governance. In an interconnected world, we need a networked multilateralism in which the United Nations family, international financial institutions, regional organizations, trading blocs, and others work together more closely and more effectively. Thus concludes the reading for this morning.
Some hands have held the world together. Some hands have fought in wars forever. So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of mine? humankind. So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of mine? Some hands can stop life from dying. Some hands comfort a baby crying. So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of mine? What shall I do with these hands of mine? What shall I do with these hands of mine? The world could use a hero of the humankind. So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of mine? I wanna sing it from my heart. I wanna hear it in the wind till it blows around the world and comes back again. And all that we can ask is for us to be free, to use them when we want, for whatever the need may be. Some hands give voice to a nation. Some hands rule the times they are changing. So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of mine? What shall I do with these hands of mine? What shall I do with these hands of mine? The world could use a hero of humankind. So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of mine? What shall I do with these hands of mine? What shall I do with these hands of mine? What use a hero of humankind? So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of mine? What shall I do with these hands of mine? What shall I do with these hands of mine? Who could use a hero of humankind? So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of mine? So tell me, what shall I do with these hands of
Good morning. My name is Rachel Bowen Pittman, and I am the Executive Director of the United Nations Association of the USA, also known as UNA USA. I'm honored to take part in this special service and would like to thank Reverend Abhi and the Cedar Lane congregation for inviting me here today. We are here to honor the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. Of course, this is not how we anticipated the world would be celebrating such a milestone, but I am inspired by the way individuals such as yourselves have adopted under the limitations of this new normal, finding new ways to connect with one another, to educate, inspire, and mobilize your community to support the UN's work. 2020 has brought unprecedented challenges that are currently impacting every person in the world. We are experiencing a shared urgency, not only to overcome a devastating global pandemic, but to rebuild a stronger foundation for global progress. It is only fitting that we would look to the UN's history and celebrate its fundamental purpose today. The UN represents humanity's highest ideals and most ambitious goals. And yet, it was born from our darkest days. 75 years ago, our world was devastated in the aftermath of World War II. Half the population lived on less than $1 per day. Human life expectancy was 45 years. Pain and trauma hung like a thick fog, a constant reminder of so many lives lost. Survival meant doing everything in our collective power to ensure humanity would never face this hardship again. From our shared experience and suffering, we created a system which would defend us from our own worst possible actions, a system to equip future generations with global teamwork as a first line of defense. As you may not know, UNA USA was fundamental to the UN's inception. In fact, UNA USA members helped to create and visualize the United Nations. 75 years ago, delegates from 50 countries came together to showcase a commitment to international cooperation and shared action for peace. Leading up to this moment, 42 organizations, including the American Association for the United Nations, now UNA USA, and the Unitarian Universalist Association, had advocated for the UN's formation through partnerships and persistent lobbying. This rich history with the UN is one of many reasons you work to protect it, defend it, support it, and advocate for it today. Former First Lady UNA USA Chairwoman and human rights trailblazer Eleanor Roosevelt said, "The world of the future is in our making. Tomorrow is now." The UNA USA community has always directed its mission for reconciling with the past, meeting the present moment with a commitment to steer toward hope rather than fear, and creating progress by first deciding what it looks like. Indeed, tomorrow is now. So here we are. It's been 75 years since white laurels and a blue banner became a symbol of peace and hope for all of us. And thanks to the UN's work, we've had some big wins for the world. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is guiding 193 countries. Nearly half of the world's children have received life-saving vaccines. Smallpox has been eradicated. There is a global agenda to end all forms of discrimination. More than 80 human rights treaties have been signed. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals were unanimously adopted. The Paris Climate Agreement was enacted. And just this past summer, Africa was declared free of wild polio virus. These are just a few of the UN's global achievements, but to count the everyday impact the UN has on human lives would be impossible. When you examine how much the UN has done for the world in under a century, hope is tangible and real. But right now, in 2020, we find ourselves against a similar backdrop as the one in 1945, when finding hope after World War II seemed impossible. Right now, major challenges of unprecedented scale are clouding our forward vision. The COVID-19 pandemic has stopped the world in its tracks, changing our lives overnight. This virus has taken more than 1,051,000 lives, devastated global and national economies, exacerbated existing racial and gender inequalities, and taken a record number of children out of school and families into poverty. It's become very clear that COVID-19 is not only a global health crisis, it's a social crisis, it's an economic crisis, it's a human rights crisis. And of course, COVID-19 is not the only danger to our global community. Police brutality, discriminatory violence, and systematic racism against people of color, particularly Black Americans, are impossible to ignore. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Jacob Blake, Daniel Prude, just a few names in the endless list of lives stolen or harmed forever at the hands of police officers. We also fear the effects of climate change, which have become more frequent and severe. Deadly hurricanes, uncontrollable wildfires, record-shattering heat waves, rising sea levels. The threats are real and increasing. In the face of all of these major challenges, our administration has backed away from the global stage, making the choice to retreat from shared progress rather than lead, as America has always done. In recent years, we stepped back from the Paris Agreement, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and stepped back from the UN Human Rights Council. We've cut funding vital to the UN's work, ending contributions to the UN Population Fund, aid to the Palestinian refugees, counterterrorism efforts, UN peacekeeping missions, and the Green Climate Funds. The US is estimated to owe the UN more than $1 billion in unpaid dues. And most recently, in a dangerous, short-sighted decision, our nation made moves to terminate our relationship with the World Health Organization in the middle of a global pandemic. It is easy to feel discouraged by the magnitude of the global challenges we face and the administration's action to remove America from multilateral agreements. Many believe that America's hard-won leadership on the global stage is being undermined. But here's the silver lining. The UN was built for moments like this. As we all know, even a system built with the best intention needs persistent voices behind it. When President Trump announced the U.S. would withdraw from the WHO, UNA USA members took swift action, sending more than 10,000 letters urging Congress to oppose the decision, educating our communities about WHO's crucial impact, and raising money for the COVID-19 response fund to support WHO. And this certainly isn't the only time in recent months that UNA USA members and others like you have turned the UN's guiding principles into local action. Recently, Americans of all ages and races have been raising their voices to leaders at every level, from our city councils to the White House, to demand justice and declare that Black Lives Matter. Our nation has not lived up to the ideals set forth in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document which the U.S. helped to write. Human rights are not guaranteed for Black people in America, and in many cases, those rights are actively overlooked and denied. Blatant, unforgivable human rights violations in the form of racial discrimination, oppression, and violence continue to plague our nation, and we are calling for justice. Thousands of you have shown up for this effort, educating yourselves and your communities, engaging in civil action, and sending thousands of letters to your members of Congress to support initiatives for lasting change. This year, UNA USA's human rights advocacy didn't stop with letters to Congress. Hundreds of UNA USA members and advocates showed up to participate in an important UN process to hold the US accountable for protecting human rights. In November, the United States will undergo a universal periodic review of its domestic human rights record at the UN Human Rights Council. In preparation for the review, UNA USA campus and community chapters hosted local consultations to provide recommendations for how the U.S. can do better. We submitted 11 reports to the UN Human Rights Council, which will examine issues like gun violence, criminal justice reform, election integrity, gender discrimination, and immigrant rights at the community level. These are only some of the many ways individuals like UNA USA members are supporting the UN's goals and carrying out its work here on our own soil, even when our federal leadership is falling short. We've now revisited the past, the devastating realities that led the UN's creation and the milestones our world has reached in 75 years since. We've discussed the present, the urgent challenges we are facing, and some of the ways the UN and global advocates like you are stepping up to meet the moment. Now, instead of visualizing the future, a word that feels distant, I want to think about our role in defining progress so that we know not only what it looks like, but what it will take to push it forward. How do we create and implement a vision for progress? Earlier this year, in preparation for the UN 75 celebration, Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for the world's largest conversation on creating the future we want. UNA USA took on the responsibility of bringing American perspectives to the table, holding virtual consultations with citizens from all 50 U.S. states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico to join the world in formulating a productive vision for the future. Combining feedback from more than 80 consultations, UNA USA learned that 77% of Americans expect a worse world based on current trends. At first glance, this figure is discouraging. But all we have to do is look to the past and recognize a familiar pattern. Collective concern for our future is exactly what propelled the creation of the UN back in 1945. The truth is, if many current trends in our nation and our world continue, the world will likely worsen in many ways. At the same time, progressive actions born from shared urgency are strengthening our global efforts for change. We are experiencing a moment where destructive global trends are accelerating movements that carve out space for progress. People from across our country and our world are standing up to end racism. We see more voices in the Black Lives Matter movement and more people exchanging their words for meaningful actions in the fight for racial justice. From our efforts to physically distance from one another during the COVID-19 outbreak, we've formed new ways of connecting with technology, which are bound to stick with us and expand the boundaries of our communities far into the future. We see more American companies, organizations, and governments taking action to combat climate change. We see young people leading the conversation as they activate for progress, demanding their futures be protected. And although there is no way to paint a positive picture for millions of Americans whose income or education has been affected in the current state of the world, we can only continue to advocate for a more inclusive, sustainable job economy and more accessible and inclusive education options for everyone, everywhere. Despite sentiments of concern among participants in our consultations, the major outcomes from these discussions were action-based solutions. The input from UNA USA consultation process is helping the UN to build a better world right now. Americans identified that individuals, governments, organizations, and the United Nations all have a critical role to play in building the future we want. Progress must be defined with the future in mind. We press for change now so that future generations have a foundation to build on. When we eventually recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, the world won't look the same as it did before. It's our task now to make sure it looks better. As we near the end of 2020, we pledge to embark on a decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in time for their 2030 deadline. The only direction to go is the one that points towards progress. We all have a stake in our future, so I implore you to connect with a goal of your own, to continue building this momentum towards 2030. Reflect on what more you can do. Continue to do to be a champion for the SDGs in your community. Lean into this network of people to provide you both support and accountability, because continuing the dialogue and engaging with others is key for success. The UN's mission declared in the UN Charter reads, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small, to promote social progress and better standards of life and larger freedom. Right now, as we honor 75 years since these words changed the world, they feel more relevant now than ever. Progress will be realized when Black Americans feel safe and respected in their own community, when we save succeeding generations from the effects of climate change, when human rights are guaranteed for every person, no matter where they live, how they worship, what they look like, or who they love, and when we can reestablish our nation's leadership on the world stage, working alongside fellow member states to prepare coordinated responses to future health crises. These are just a few of many ways we must define progress in this moment. And in another 25 years, when the UN turns 100, we will surely need new, evolved definitions for progress. But the foundation will be stronger, and the UN will still support humankind's never-ending pursuit for a better world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rachel Pittman, for your inspiring message today, for reminding us that progress must be defined with the future in mind, that we all have a stake in the future, and for challenging us to lean together into the global and local network of support to achieve the UN Sustainable Goals by 2030. I also thank my colleague Reverend Katie Romano Griffin, Don Bliss, Marlene Berg, our worship associate Jessica Sawyer, our musicians Jenny Crane and members of the Children's Choir, Dr. Jasmine Lee, the Cedar Lane Quartet, and the Cedar Lane Virtual Choir for the beautiful music that enriched and enlivened today's service. And thank you to our amazing AV team, Michael McCrickard, Mike Morse, Don Woodruff, Barb Thompson, Todd Chernikoff, for your outstanding technical support, and Rebecca Nachtrieb for the beautiful in-gathering slides. And thank you to our membership staff and pastoral volunteers who have been active in the live chat. Friends, fans, and members of Cedar Lane, please join us with your favorite beverage of choice for a virtual coffee hour immediately following the service. The URL for the coffee hour will be in the YouTube chat soon after the postlude. And join us next Sunday at 11 a.m. for a special Election Sunday service, which will also include a remembrance ritual. I will be joined in the pulpit with my colleague Reverend Katie, Dana Edwards, and the Reverend Barry Lynn. We look forward to seeing you then. Our benediction is an excerpt from Maya Angelou's A Brave and Startling Truth. We, this people on a small, lonely planet, traveling through casual space, past aloof stars, across the way of indifferent suns, to a destination where all signs tell us it is possible and imperative that we learn a brave and startling truth. And when we come to it, to the day of peacemaking, when we release our fingers from fists of hostility and allow the pure air to cool our palms, we, this people, on this wayward floating body created on this earth, of this earth, have the power to fashion for this earth a climate where everyone can live freely without sanctimonious piety, without crippling fear. When we come to it, we must confess that we are the possible, we are the miraculous, the true wonder of this world. That is when and only when we come to it. Go in peace, go making peace, living gently, loving mightily, and bowing and breathing into the mystery.
to